welcome everyone. So my name is Marnie Ergil, and I am here with Alan Tsaur, who is going to be one of the speakers at the 2023 Shen Nong Society Conference. The conference is being held on April 15th. We'll have the conference, and then on April 16th, we're going to have another day with just one speaker. Jean will be able to go off teaching. Alan is going to be speaking about treating disease or constitution, a re-examination of Zhang Jingyue's 8 principles and modern Jing treatment. I'm going to spend just a few minutes with you guys and with Alan, talking about who Alan is, what the work is that he's doing. Let me just briefly say that Alan is a practitioner of Chinese medicine and a translator extraordinaire. He's amazing. So the text he's working on is this one. I don't know if you can see it, but it's this huge, big book called Jingyue Quanshu. And it's the complete compendium of Zhang Jingyue. The first 2 volumes are already out, published by Purple Cloud Press. We will have these available at the conference, but you can also order them directly from Purple Cloud. And I understand the 3rd one will also be out before the conference. So we're very excited about that.
I hope. We're still working on it.
Right.
Yeah,
because not before and then shortly after.
Yeah, hopefully, because
huge work that Alan is doing.
We hope to get a manuscript in ASAP. I'm still waiting to hear back from the proofreader, but hopefully we'll get it rolling very soon.
Yeah, excellent. So I'm just going to start, Alan, and ask you, to tell us a little bit about your background in Chinese medicine, how you got here, why, and how you got into translation.
Whoa. So let's do the short version. I was trained as an engineer in college. So I was doing material science engineering. So shortly after college, I began to work in China in the chemical industry, working on as a marketing consultant. So during which I was just doing my business. But since the life when I was by myself in China, like I feel like there was a lot of free time that I didn't know what to do. So I began, because I was by myself and I didn't figure out a VPN at the time. I was a little bit dumb at the time, so I didn't figure out VPN. So I was cut off from everyone and I had nothing to do. So around the time, I just decided to do some charity work. So I joined the organization. So we would just travel to all the remote villages and also to all the universities to hand out like scholarship fund or financial aids to those impoverished students who are in college, but they might not have the living expenses covered by their family and themselves. So during the time, I interacted with like hundreds of students. One thing that's kind of stood out to me around the time is that a lot of them fell into poverty because of medical expenses.
So even in China, interesting.
Yeah, because they don't really have something like a universal healthcare system.
Right.
So a lot of times it's like by saving. I heard there's some type of health saving account or something, but I don't really know the system. But from what I heard is that because around if one of the parents is sick, and usually drags on the entire family, and everyone around them just start dropping out of school and trying to support the family, keep everything going. Right. And so, but the thing is, if they get into any sort of like chronic illness, then not only do they just become like without any source of income, but also they become almost like a financial burden for the entire family. Right. So around time I began to think about like, okay, so if we want to solve the poverty issue, how do we deal with that? And the first thing in mind is like, okay, we have to talk about medicine because those people are not getting better. So how can we help those people? So, but around the time when I heard a lot of those chronic diseases are like diabetes or complication from that, and or stroke or anything. And yes, we do have some strength in Western medicine to deal with some of the more acute conditions, but for chronic issues, it doesn't seem like to be the most effective way to deal with that. So around the time I was looking, I just start typing out Baidu basically the Google equivalent in China. So
Right.
to search out, okay, so what can you do with, like, for example, diabetes? And so then I started to see a lot of like writings on Chinese medicine side. I was like,
Cool.
interesting. We have a lot of research in Chinese medicine. Why are we not using it? And around the same time, one of my best buddy back in college, he was joining the U.S. Marine,
Mhm.
and at the same time, I think it was like almost like 2-3 months before he was going to get into a boot camp. He received a message from it's a bone marrow registry
Mhm.
match. So basically, he has been matched with some
Um,
14-year-old kid back down in Houston or something. So he was asking me, say, "Hey, Alan, you are really good with research, and I know you have been doing some research into the medicine. Do you think I should go through with this procedure?" I mean, morally, he thinks he should be doing it, even though
Right.
he's going to join the Marine.
Right.
And so then once again, I did some research on the Western side and on the Eastern side. And on the Western side, we don't have much literature on that front. It's like, I mean, basically, you just, if you want to do it, do it.
Right.
It doesn't tell you much side effect, but on the Eastern side, people say do not do it. And for me, I found it very interesting. Was like, why is the response so different?
Mhm.
And then I did more digging, and that was around the time I began to read about a lot of essays by this person called Ni Haixia.
Mhm.
So he was a Taiwanese American acupuncturist down in Florida. I think he was a chairperson of the board down there
Yeah,
at one
I
time.
know Dr. Shen. Yeah.
Yeah,
Tyler Shen.
and he wrote a lot of articles against Western medicine
Yes.
on the site. So they were very entertaining, but at the same time, it was very intriguing because in a case we're talking about leukemia, and he claimed that he could diagnose it, and he claimed that there are some cases where people got better. So for me, that was very curious, because how how could you deal with such a severe disease without like bone marrow transplant? So then I read more about his things, and the more I read, the more I got interested. So then I just began to study on my own,
Wow.
and then I signed up and bought most of his material, and then just kind of study Chinese medicine on myself, by myself. That was around 2011, 2012, and around 2012, I decided to quit my job because one thing is curiosity, but the other thing, just at the time I was by myself in China, I feel like
Very
a little
hard.
bit isolated. And I was just like,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't want to stay there forever, so I decided to leave. And one of the excuses I gave to my boss at the time, say, "Oh, right now I want to study this thing, and if it doesn't work out, I'll come back."
Right.
But I never went back. So
Never
so
mind.
so
Oh,
in 2013, I went to school here in Maryland, and since I'm from Maryland, and
Mhm.
so I attended. At the time, it was called Thai Sophia Institute. Right now,
Mhm.
it's called Maryland Universal Integrated Health.
Yep.
And so I studied there from 2013 to 2017, and I received a doctoral degree from there. And
Okay.
so the Zhang part has something to do with this, actually, because
Yeah. So that's my next question. How did you discover Zhang and
yeah,
why?
we can do a long version or short version. So basically, okay, so two key points. So one, the first thing is when I first began to study Chinese medicine more so in a more systematic way, I went to Taiwan and visited a friend. And at the time, he was studying in China Medical University in Taichung. So he said, okay, since you are going to study Chinese medicine, there are a few books you have to read. So the first book he told me is like, you had to read a Su Wen.
Fair enough.
So yeah, it's not a big deal, only 700 pages in Chinese.
Right.
So
No big deal.
and he say you should read this commentary or annotation by Dr. Wei Che Yang.
Okay.
And so he's still here in the States. He's in Roland Heights, and he's one of the lineage holders of the Master Tong tradition. So I bought that book, and then I read it. I didn't get it. Then I closed the book and put it on my shelf. So back to NVIH. So we were going through the class. We were talking about Su Wen Chapter 8, basically the official charges of the 12 officials or 11 officials. I don't remember. So a lot of them, if you just read through Ang shows, and it kind of makes sense. But at the same time, it just feels weird. It just feels like something might be missing. So at the same time, I just like, oh, I do have this annotation from Dr. Wei Jia. So took it over and read through it. It's like, okay, he has some. So he has the original passage and also Baihua, basically modern Chinese annotation. And then I read his modern Chinese annotation. It's like, wait a second. It's like, where did he get this idea? Because he kind of came up with something completely new. And then I looked through his annotation, and his citation was from Zhang Jingyue.
Okay.
So that was the first time I recognized the name Zhang Jingyue. But at the same time, I was like, didn't know him. But later on, as we went through with a school program, we read more and more Neijing passage. And every single time, the first thing I just kind of let go on Zhou, I just kind of began to read Yang Weiqie on its own, since I read Chinese anyway. So I read it, and every single time I would see something amazing from Zhang Jingyue's annotation. So after a month or two of that, I was like, okay, I need to get this book. Whatever Zhang Jingyue has written, I need to get his book.
You need to get it. So there you go.
Yeah, that's how I got started with Zhang Jingyue. So it was because of this person who told me to read a book that had the Zhang Jingyue annotation, and then because we're studying the canon. So I really got introduced to Zhang Jingyue because of the canons. And later on, it really interests me was that when we went through the TCM module during my program, because my program is not a TCM program.
No, not at all. Not TCM, yeah.
So during the TCM weekends, and I got introduced to the A principle. I was like, oh, interesting. So we went through the class, but then I had a lot of questions towards the end, because I was like, what do you mean yin and yang? Because everything makes sense except yin and yang.
Yeah, okay.
Like cold, heat, cool, exterior, interior.
But what is yin and what is yang? And
yeah, what's yin and yang? But because by the end of it, it's like philosophical. It's like and I was not very satisfied with that answer presented by Machocha, which was the textbook I was using. So he's like, oh yeah, yin and yang means yin deficiency, yang deficiency. That's it. And also Zhu Danji says that the yang is always super abundant. That's it. So besides that, we don't really get much of it. So then I decided to once again look at what Zhang Jingyue had to say, and then I discovered Zhang Jingyue came up with a system. He had a different name. He called it yin yang and the sixth variation. And at the time, I didn't really know what that means. But later on, when I began to work through with his translation, I think I did begin to decipher what he meant by that.
So hang on just a second. I think it would be important for people listening to this to tell them a little bit about who Zhang Jingyue was when he lived, because they may not know.
Yeah, Zhang Jingyue is like this. So he was a scholar physician who lived in, I think, 1560 to 1640 something. And so it's like early 17th century, so before the founding of this country. And so he was living towards the end of the Ming Dynasty. So at first he did, I think his father was a military general or something, and he actually wanted to do more military stuff. And so when he was very young, he followed his father's footsteps. He went to the capital, and he was there, and he was at one time serving as a military strategist. So he went, according to his biography, he actually went to the Chinese expedition of the Korean War. So basically, Japan invaded Korea in the 17th century. So he actually might have participated in some wars in that. And so, but apparently his military career was going nowhere. And also ever since he was young, he began to study some medicine with some I think it's a Master Jing something. I don't remember his name. So he had a very strong medical foundation, but he never really treated it as his full-time job, because he wanted to be a military person, be a military tactician, and create this like heroic deeds and glory for himself and glorify his family, things like that. But if you read about history about towards the end of Ming Dynasty, it's a bad time to be a military general.
Bad time to be in the military,
yeah, because everything was going downhill. And also towards the end of Ming Dynasty, they lost entire northern territory to the Manchurians. So and then the Chinese military just couldn't stay back at the Great Wall, never venture out again. So after that, he saw that the Chinese military was beyond saving, or maybe he had there's no more opportunity for him. So he decided to retire. I think he was like in his 50. And then he went back to his hometown and decided to write about medicine. And
So he
so
was not a physician from the start, from the get-go. This came later for him.
Yeah, so I think he worked through medicine throughout that time period, but he never really committed full time until he retired from the military career. And so he spent, I think he spent almost 20-30 years to write a comprehensive commentary for the Neijing. So that thing is called Lei Jing. In Chinese, in English, it's called Categorized Canon of the inner canon. So basically, in that he divided, he broke up the entire Neijing, both Ling Shu and Siwen, into 12 categories and placed the relative chapters together, and annotated every single line of it. And yeah, that is a massive work.
So that's your next project, right?
Oh no, I'm not touching it. I'm sure I can do it. I'm not touching it.
Good luck.
It's too massive.
It's huge. Yeah.
It takes me a lifetime.
Yeah.
And so basically that was the material I was first impressed with all the annotation from the Neijing that came from Zhang Jing. It took him 20-30 years to complete. And after that, he wrote the complete companion. And that also took him almost 20 years to complete. So that's a text I primarily work on right now. And so he is in place of history, he's a very influential person. First off, he's a person who really wrote this comprehensive commentary on the Neijing, because right now, if you study Neijing, there are 3 commentaries you have to read. So one is Ma Shi. So he's actually the first person who wrote the comprehensive commentary on the Ling Shu. Before that, we had a few more other commentary, but no one wrote on the Ling Shu. So you had to read Ma Shi, you had to read Zhang Jingyue, and also you had to read Zhang Zhicong. And each of them have a different flavor. Like Ma Shi is more like a Nanjing plus channel person, so he cut in from that perspective. Zhang Jingyue coming from a more yin and yang perspective from the Minmen. He uses the Minmen idea a lot, and we're going to talk about Minmen next. Zhang Zhicong talk about more from the 5 movement 6 qi perspective, which is not really translated to the West today.
五运六气.
Yeah, 五运六气, 5 movement 6 qi, and that thing is complicated.
It's very complicated.
It's very complicated.
Calendrics and all sorts of things. Yeah.
So in place of history, Zhang Jingyue, first he did that work. That's super impressed by himself. But the other thing that's super influential is he was a founder, or like the person who really propelled this doctrine of warming and tonification. And so today, if we ever wonder why do we use so much kidney tonics in the clinic, or if you have all the debate about you should tonify yang all the time, it probably came from him. And at the same time, he also wrote a lot of stuff. So today, when we talk about the 10 questions in clinic, it came from him, and also the 8 principle that came from him. Except he kind of defined it slightly differently, and actually that's what I want to talk about in this conference today, because I feel like a lot of things are lost in not even just translation. It's like when we read,
never made it here.
Yeah, it's like when we do translation, one thing we have to consider is what is the historical context of the writing? Because when we first read a book, or even when I first started doing translation, I just kind of treat a work as a standalone text. As though that text it's like the sole holder of truth or something. That book is the sole source of information. But the more I study and the more I translate, and this actually has, I need to mention that I have my fullest gratitude to Val Settles from ACCHS, because a few years ago, he invited me to teach on a program called Historical Schools of Chinese Medicine, in which I went through 7 classical school of herbal medicine, and also we talk about 30-40 different practitioners and what they stood for. And that class really have a profound impact on me as a scholar or as a translator, because now when I look at Zhang Jingyue, one question I always had in my mind is that what is he trying to respond to?
Right.
Like, he made this claim or this argument. Why? And of
Someone
course,
else you must be arguing with someone else essentially in this
correct.
one. Yeah.
So, and he does leave us a lot of clues along
Mhm.
his writing. Like, of course, if you read through the volume 1 to 3, you know that he has something against Zhu Danxi. He has something against Liu Wansu, and sometimes not in the most friendly terms.
That's
But
right.
yeah, so you had some hints there, but those hints were not. I didn't really capture that hint when I was really working through that translation. To be honest, like around time. But later on, as I worked even more with him, I realized that what he was responding to was not Liu Wansu or Zhu Danxi. Actually, he was responding to the mainstream medicine.
Oh.
So basically, Liu Wansu and Zhu Danxi, they came up with something during their time, and they were actually responding to something else as well,
Yes, absolutely.
and which was also the mainstream medicine, which was the Song Imperial medicine.
Right.
And they saw some flaws in it. They wanted to change something. They saw the limitation. They want to. So Liu Wansu was the guy who came out strongly against the imperial medicine. He came
Right.
out with some mechanism to explain why his claim could be valid. And then Zhu Danxi came he kind of like backing up in some sense. He cited a lot of Neo-Confucian ideas to back up Liu Wansu's claim. And after that, their ideas became mainstream. And then Zhang Jing, and 400 years later in Zhang Jingyue's time, Zhang Jingyue is like, okay, now you guys are mainstream. We see a lot of issues with that. Let me destroy you.
Well, but more really just let's broaden our scope. Let's look outside of this narrow place where we are. That's the beauty of Chinese medicine, is that we have this, we can look in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. And so one of the things is that when I first started work on the translation, I almost have this demon image of Zhu Danxi and Liu Wansu. They are the demons.
Oh,
but the more I work through their work, I was like, oh, the more I appreciate their work. Is like, okay, they were up to something, and whatever they say was very valid. But unfortunately, because of historical
medicine and just the healthcare needs by the time Zhang Jingyue was living were very different also.
Yeah. Also, the medicine needs to progress. Right. It needs to develop, adapt to the time. Or sometimes when you declare new ideas, it sounds very convincing. It sounds beautiful at the time, but well, we withstand the test of time. That's another issue. And especially when people take your ideas and take it to the extreme, then we will have issue with that. And so I think that's what happened to Zhang Jingyue. And also, that one thing that's very funny is right now I'm working through some later material from the Wenbin and also from the Shanghanlun. People like Chen Xiuyuan and also Wu Jitong. Both of them hate Zhang Jingyue.
Really?
Yeah, that is very surprising, because I understand why Chen Xiuyuan would hate him, because Chen Xiuyuan is like this Shanghanlun icon. If it's not coming from Shanghanlun, it's like BS. I'll burn it. Right. And so anything is not Shanghanlun is not kosher with him. So I understand Chen Xiuyuan's perspective, but Wu Jitong, that one is
that's very interesting.
Yeah. And Wu Jitong criticized him so much, and I was like, oh, I didn't expect that. I thought you guys are in the same.
Well, one of the things that I will say, I also just want to say about Alan's books, when you read them, read the footnotes. They are the most interesting part of these books. I mean, because Alan really goes into all of this history and helps us to understand why Zhang Jingyue is writing what he's writing, where it's coming from, and who he's talking to, right? And so really, that was one of the things that just so impressed me with these books when they came out. It's like, oh my God, this is a real scholarly translation. It's just wonderful.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I try.
So at the Shen Nong Society Conference, as I said, Alan's going to be speaking. The title of his talk is Treating Disease or Constitution, a re-examination of Zhang Jingyue's 8 principles and modern Jingfang treatment framework. Can you tell us in just a few minutes what that means? Without spoiling it? Okay. Yes, so basically, I think what I just mentioned just minutes ago is kind of like the first part of it. I want to re-examine like what is the historical context
of Zhang Jingyue's A principle. Like when he talked about A principle, what was he responding to? And of course, I definitely want to talk about what yin yang meant to him, because that is one huge missing piece from my mind. That's from the modern interpretation of the A principle. So I want to re-examine that part. And
fabulous! I'm so excited.
and after that we had ideas. Then we will move towards, because let me spoil a little bit, but I'll not give you a context. So basically, it's a debate between where do you treat in a treatment. Basically, do you treat a disease, or do you treat a constitution? So I hope to bring some proof to demonstrate my point with the first part of that. And after that, I'll just go through a very simple case,
Okay.
in which I struggle a lot with. So it's a real patient in a real case, and it's an interesting case. So in which I have a patient, it's a difficult case, and how I try to teach her. To treat her. And of course, the modern default is always you address the chief concern first.
Right.
But sometimes things don't work out.
That's right.
and so that's like, it's like how I encounter this case, how I struggle, how I have my deep reflection, and all my crisis mode, and so trying to figure out how to treat her. And then I treated her with a very interesting formula, and somehow got rid of her like some really weird.
I'm excited to hear about it. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
So as I said, Alan will be one of our speakers for the April 15th Shen Nong Society Conference, which will be either live in New York City, which is where Alan and I will be, or online as well, if you'd prefer to stream. You can go to www.shennong.society.org to register, and we really, really hope to see you there. So thank you all very much.